Hey everyone, welcome back to the Dr. Shana Show. This week, my special guest is a mindfulness coach and author, Erin Easton. She's a Montrose local, and I will let her introduce a little bit about her business.
Erin Easton, and I own New Leaf Mindfulness Coaching here in Montrose. And I've been here in Montrose about 5 years working on this, working on my own practice for about 12 years, and started off as a teacher and taught French and Spanish and ESL. And then towards the end, I taught brain science and mindfulness and did my master's research in the use of meditation and mindfulness in language acquisition. Did that in Geneva, Switzerland. And while I was working on my master's, I was studying at the Shedrub Chokirling Monastery, which was outside of Geneva at Mount Saleve, and went every Friday to meditations. And it was a Tibetan Buddhist monastery. And I just remember sitting in those sessions and it was in French, so my French is really great, but still these deep philosophical teachings in French, there were times where I think I'm getting all of this, but what I did pick up, it was almost like my own truth being taught back to me. Oh, that feels like my wisdom that maybe I just haven't been in tune with or hearing, and it was like somebody was telling it back to me, oh, yes, that makes a lot of sense on how to look at the world and how to look at ourselves. And I found that I was learning a lot more in those classes than in my master's classes.
Wow.
And so started diving deeper into that and started to go to Plum Village, Thich Nhat center in Bordeaux. Did a lot of workshops and trainings and retreats through him, joined a Sangha in Geneva, and my practice was just growing and growing, and I was loving it more and more, and making changes. It was slowly, it's not huge, abrupt changes, but you just kind of start noticing shifts in
Totally.
how you relate to school, how you relate to other people, how you relate to your past stories and traumas, how you relate to pain in your body.
To yourself. Yeah, totally.
And
pain's a big one.
It was making everything better and easier. And I was a really type A person, and I would always plan 10 steps ahead and had to be in control and worried about everything. And I'd say that's still my personality, but it doesn't drive me as much, and it doesn't drive me as crazy.
Right. So mindfulness, I just like to give people a base definition. And my understanding is it's basically bringing awareness to whatever it is, the situation, how you feel in your body, how school is affecting you, or how you're perceiving it's affecting you. How would you define it?
I always say I like, it's a non-judgmental curiosity.
Non-judgmental.
About
Perfect.
things. And it brings acceptance in. So I think the non-judgment and the acceptance and the compassion are big parts of mindfulness. And so that you're experiencing life, you're participating in it, but you're not resisting, fighting, judging, pushing so hard to control. It lets you show up with intention and just be there as your authentic self and as your kind of healthy, balanced self, without so much you feeling like you have to dictate and fix and solve and control.
Kind of being just an observer, the third person, can you lean back and observe the sensation or experience you're having and be like, that's interesting. I like this non-judgmental curiosity because that really encapsulates that, let's lean back and just check this situation out.
Yeah.
Okay, so you've done a lot of work. Thich Nhat Hanh, I've read a couple of his books, been very helpful. I think there's one, something communication, that I found to be really valuable. And I really like what you said. It's like, okay, you were picking it up in French, maybe not entirely grasping some of the deeper philosophical, but you were hearing it in a way that was like, wow, this feels like known wisdom. And I definitely feel this way when I'm like hearing different philosophical talks. Before the show started, I was talking about Alan Watts, and I'm like, God, this guy died in the 70s. He sounds like he's like so pertinent to what is happening right now today in 2025. And when I hear his old lectures, I'm like, it's just like, wow, I've had those thoughts. And like he just articulated that thought that I had so much more eloquently than I could have. And I appreciate that. And I feel like Thich Nhat Hanh is similar in his like elegance of like his books are short and sweet, but so packed with information.
Yeah, he is definitely my favorite teacher. I definitely gravitate most towards him, but he always talks a lot about the teachings have to be in the language of the people you're talking to.
Interesting.
So, like, I've gone to some Buddhist teachings and it's like they're, oh my God, like all the lingo and the ancient texts and all the lists of things. And it's like they try to make it inaccessible so that it seems grandiose and nice. And Thich Nhat Hanh is exactly the opposite. He's like, if you're speaking to a child, you use their language. Like you leave the jargon out of it. And if you're speaking to someone in the Western world, like you use the way they would see things, the way they relate to things, their dialect and language. And he's done such a great job at making it so accessible to everybody.
Yeah, making it accessible to the Western mind because we articulate, or we orient to things in a very certain way. And oftentimes most of us grew up in some kind of Judeo-Christian upbringing. And so this is one thing that I love about Alan Watts. And it sounds like I wonder if they even knew each other at all because I believe, I don't know Alan Watts' background. I know that he brought Taoism to kind of the Western world. And he was an English philosopher. Anyway, speaking it from the Judeo-Christian perspective helps us understand a little bit better.
Totally.
And anything in science, when we talk above someone, it just makes people feel dumb. And that is non-judgmental curiosity. Like that is literally the opposite of what the intention of mindfulness is supposed to be.
Yep. Yeah. So, and he's passed now, but he has hundreds and hundreds of books, and his teachings go on, and his centers go on. So, try to keep that tradition pretty alive.
Plum Village, where's that at?
In Bordeaux, France.
France. Bordeaux, France. Okay, got you.
Has centers in Escondido in California, which I've been to several times. Blue Cliff Monastery in New York. And I think there's one in the Midwest.
Cool.
Somewhere.
So it really has permeated throughout like American culture, which is really neat. Yeah. I know why I started embarking on my mindfulness journey. I'd be curious if you'd be willing to share like what led you to, and you're said, hey, I'm a type A person. Like what led you to stumbling into mindfulness?
A back injury.
Pain.
Yeah. Yep, I had a ruptured disc in my back, and I have been dealing with that for 12 years, which is actually 13. And then a year into it, I picked up meditation and mindfulness. And it really does. It triggers depression, it triggers anxiety, self-doubt, fear, everything you can imagine, and your whole life changes. And I was a major athlete and was a competitive mountain biker and skier, and couldn't do really any of that anymore. And little short, slow walks was about it. And so, you kind of lose your identity, you lose who you are. And I needed something to ground me because I was spinning out of control.
Lost kind of everything. And I don't know about for you, but my physical activity is definitely a way that of stress relieving.
Yeah.
And then I get to be outside, and then to not have that, and just being postpartum, like walking half a block, I was like, I'm done. We need to go back. I need to go to sleep for like 3 hours now.
Yeah.
A very humbling experience to have like a pain, and then that ripple effect everything.
Yeah.
Did it change your pain or change your relationship you had to the pain?
Both. First, the work that you do in meditations and practices is to change your relationship to it, to drop your resistance, drop the fight, drop the judgment, bring love and compassion, do a lot of listening. But when you do that, and especially with injuries like mine, a lot of the pain is worsened and heightened, amplified by your tightness. So the tighter you hold the muscles around it, the more it pulls it out of balance, out of whack, and the more active those nerves get of firing easier and more often. Yeah. So as you're doing the work to do more acceptance and bring love and compassion to it, it eases that struggle. And it also, it calms down your nervous system. So pain is just firing, it's signals going back that say something's not right, we're not okay. And as you calm that down, those signals get less frequent and not as loud.
Nice. So it does innately change it, but it's realizing like, okay, you said something that was important, that the tone of your muscles, the tension that you carry. And this is such like an oxymoron almost, because it's like somehow if I like stabilize or if I like support, then it's going to be less painful. And it's just like this vicious cycle of like more squeezing, more tension causes more and more pain. And I don't know if there's a single type of pain. I try and avoid always and never, because there's usually an outlier, but typically pain is affected that way, period. And when I think of tense muscles, I think of being stressed. And then our low back, sitting, standing, sleeping, every part of our existence is kind of impacted by that.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's hard to know. It's like the chicken and the egg, because I also know my type A, and a lot of my emotional traumas went right into the low back. So it can be a cause of your pain, and then also your kind of depression, anxiety, emotional states are an effect of the pain. So they kind of work with each other and amplify. So if you can do any kind of work to calm that down, it can be preventative and also restorative and healing.
Yeah, I had a friend when I was in ND school. She was working in a facility where they used some pretty harsh chemicals, and they were overusing those chemicals inappropriately, and she was pretty sensitive, and she ended up passing out because of it and falling, and it was a cement floor, and she was big into transcendental meditation. And when she fell and hit the floor, it's a cement floor, mind you, heads versus cement is generally not good, she went into a TM state. And her neurologist was like, I wonder if you going into that TM state is what protected her brain from such a serious brain injury. She was in a coma for a little while, and then she came out of it and was pretty much fine, which is kind of crazy. So meditation and mindfulness, I feel like they really go together. And maybe I'll rewind and say, I think a lot of people misunderstand what meditation is, and it took me a while to get this. And it's not about doing it right. There's no right. I personally think life's greatest meditation is doing the dishes. We all have dishes. We have plenty of dishes to do. I could either stand there fuming, pissed that there's more dishes or that it didn't get rinsed off and I have to spend 20 minutes scraping it off, or I can just be like, I'm just doing the dishes. Just like a way to calmly wash away whatever's going on in my brain. And meditation doesn't have to be sitting there in some crisscrossed applesauce position where your legs are all kinked and you can't sit well and fold it over like a pretzel. You can sit like that, and some people have a predisposition to being able to and wanting to, but it can be anything.
Yeah.
Washing your face can be a meditation. And and I don't know if it's the Western world only, if we just all have this we need to rush through everything that we're doing. And can we just bring a few more moments of joy and pleasure to what we're doing and how that changes our entire physiological situation. I'm a big fan of like mornings. So like my husband's like, why do you get up and do the dishes? I was like, I don't know. It's just a great way to kind of like wake up without doing anything that requires much effort. Just like quick, wash any dishes that are in the dishwasher or put the dishes away. Like, but mindfulness and meditation can be very life-changing. Like it seems like, oh, that's nice. And then I'm sure you've heard the quote of like, oh, the people that don't have time to meditate actually need to meditate for an hour, not just 20 minutes. It's like, you're rushing so much. Have you heard that?
Yeah.
But it makes it be like, what do you mean I need to meditate for an hour? I don't have time to meditate for an hour.
Yeah.
I've been there.
Yeah. I think that's why I like mindfulness more than meditation, because I think the word meditation is more associated with like you have to have a separate practice,
Right.
You have to be in a certain place, in a certain posture. And mindfulness is like the practice is everyday life.
Exactly.
Like you bring it wherever you are. Formal practices, I think, are, when I teach people, we always use formal practices because at first you probably don't know how to enter into that mental space doing the dishes. Like you have such a habit energy of what doing the dishes is like and where your thoughts go and how you approach it. So doing a formal meditation when you're starting can kind of help shift those mind states and like help you to recognize the mental patterns that you're trying to kind of change or get out of while you're doing that. But once you kind of learn that mental state, the main goal is that you can bring it out into everyday life and make it when you're walking. Lots of people love their walking meditation or brushing your teeth or cooking, chopping vegetables. And I think Thich Nhat Hanh's centers do a magnificent job of teaching that because they're so well-rounded. Like I've done Vipassana where you're like 10 days in silence and meditate like 10 hours a day. But I got more out of my practices at Plum Village because I was interacting. I was doing everyday things. You do working meditation. So maybe you're scrubbing a toilet or like working in the garden, but it helps you to integrate and say like, life is your meditation. Like how you speak to others, how you relate to yourself, how you're approaching the things you're doing, like that's your meditation. And it makes it more accessible to people because those people that are busy, I say, well, you don't have to take an hour aside. Choose like 4 things in your day that you're going to do mindfully.
Yeah.
And just use that as your practice.
Absolutely. And I love that, making it accessible and like integrating it to our lifestyles that we already have. The reason I really like that is because no one needs one more thing to add to their morning routines or whatever. Like some of these people get really intense about morning routines or nighttime routines. And to me, as also a type A, go, get things done kind of person, that makes me really stressed out because then if I don't do it,
Yeah.
I have lots of things to say to myself about it. And so when I let go of having a routine or it needs to be done a certain way, but it is also true that it's important to like start and learning those skills because like you said, and I think about yoga a lot, like the point of practicing yoga is to be able to take it off the mat. And so, when someone cuts you off in traffic, you don't get upset. You don't know what's going on with that person. Maybe their wife's in the emergency room, or maybe they're late for a meeting, or maybe they just dropped their cigarette butt. I don't know. Like, it's why do I need to have a reaction because someone else is having an issue or reaction? Do I need to respond? Do I need to react right back, or can I respond? And that's taking that moment and being like, but it's taken time. As a former person that tends to get quite, aggressive in my over little things, dumb things, milk spilled, I'm going to yell about it. Why?
Yeah.
Like, does that solve the problem? Just pet the milk up. It's fine. Right?
Right. And that's a learning, I think that's what I do in coaching. It's a learning process of how you switch that approach to life and the perspectives. And the thoughts you're carrying in your mind. Because most of us, and I was the same way, I didn't think I had a choice. I thought what was going on in my mind was just my experience, and it was brought to me because of the circumstances I was in. And so it's a learning process to start switching that and learning that, oh, it's not really, my experience of the world around me is a byproduct of how I see it, interpret it, interact with it, judge it. And I have a choice in that, but I have to learn. And it's not, I always tell people it's very simple, but it's one of the hardest things you'll ever do.
Simple is not easy.
Yeah.
Definitely not.
It's actually really hard because our brains, if the brain's working really hard and we're like, oh yeah, I'm like making progress, I'm important, I'm solving something, it distracts the mind and the mind thinks this is great. If you tell the mind to just focus on your breath, the mind is like, oh, this is not fun. I'm not being important. This is not distracting me. And so it's definitely a training. But you have to do that because that's teaching you how to redirect your attention.
Exactly.
And if you can't do that, then in those heightened reactive moments, there's no way you're going to be able to pull yourself out of that reality you just created, recenter, ask yourself what's most important to you, how you want to see the world, and then shift into thoughts, perspectives, mentalities that are going to nurture that experience.
And the breath, this is oftentimes a good starting practice for people because it's something that we have where we don't have to remember to bring. And so we can say, okay, I'm going to, sit back in my chair at the office and I'm going to spend 5 minutes just breathing and observing my breath. Man, it's difficult. God, I keep thinking, oh, that thing at work, That's the practice, though, is to realize that the mind is going in 12 places at once. And the goal is for you to be like, oh, but my breath. Oh, but my breath. Oh, but my breath. So that we can call our attention back and we're not being controlled by our thoughts. We are in control of our thoughts more than our thoughts control us. But it takes that moment of like realizing that about our breath.
Yeah.
Are there any other tools that you find to be helpful, like instead of the grounding element being the breath that people tend to use or that you've used yourself?
Sensory awareness. So I like to do one where it doesn't matter the number, but you list like 10 things I'm hearing, 5 things I'm touching, smelling, seeing. And so anything like those people like, because it can be kind of like a game and it brings your attention, you have to be noticing, but it's also at the same time bringing your awareness back to where you are in this moment. So you were off thinking about your grocery list or something that person said that made you angry, and then you try to list 10 things you're seeing and it's like, oh yeah, I'm right here in this room, that person isn't even here. I can't do anything about that right now. Where am I at in this moment?
So it's bringing us back to our present moment right here and now. And like that sounds so cliche, but truly when we experience ourselves with our sensory organs, our sight, our smell, our touch, our taste, I mean, I guess if you have, and I did a really profound tasting exercise once with, I think it was like a nut, a raisin, and a piece of chocolate. And we did each one separately, and then we did them together. And like how big of a difference spending that time really like living in luxury with that piece of chocolate or the sweetness of the raisin or the crunch of the nut, and then mixing them all together. It was like, wait a minute, I kind of lose some of the value and the benefit of those.
Yeah.
And that didn't take but like a few moments, like maybe, I don't even think it took 5 minutes to do that exercise. And those little things just bringing us back to the right now in this moment. What do you think is so powerful about bringing ourselves back to the present moment?
Well, in studies, they've found that about 50% of our day is spent in mind wandering.
Wow.
So you're on autopilot. You don't have to think about what you're doing, that we've programmed muscle memory. But then 90% of that mind wandering is negative.
Ooh.
So that means about 46% of your day is spent thinking about bad things.
That's terrible.
Yeah. And they don't have to be like super bad, right? But they're like judgments on yourself. I didn't do that well enough. I'm worried about how I'll do there. I wish I hadn't said that. This is uncomfortable. I'm cold.
Right.
But all of those are generating a reality that's not so nice to be in. We're
we live in our own
judging,
heads,
we're fearful, we're creating worry stories. So teaching yourself, right, in those moments of simplicity, you're putting on your pants. Normally you don't have to think about putting on your pants. And so your mind is off worrying about what's going to happen in that day, making bad predictions. If you train yourself to come back to the here and now and be grateful for these pants that are elastic and fit over your leg and feel so nice running over your freshly shaven skin.
Right.
That's a pleasant, like very simple and mundane, but you can turn it into a very pleasant experience. So now you've turned that negative time you could have been spent mind wandering into a pleasant, noticing the conditions of happiness in this moment.
It's kind of like a moving gratitude practice too, because it's like, God, I'm really glad these pants fit so well, and I got to shave my legs. Like, it really is bringing a little more pleasure and gratitude to the very moment. And we all have heard like, oh my God, I just have a gratitude practice. And I've never thought about having an integrated into my day-to-day gratitude practice. That makes a lot of sense. It's like every moment, like that's the power of mindfulness. It's like changing 46%, let's just call it 50% of the day we think about crap that's not helpful for us. Well, it's no wonder why that, the news, and we look for the negative things and we dwell on the negative things. It's like we forget to remember the good things that happen to us. And good, I'm using this and that's a judgmental term, something that feels nice when we can create that ourselves. Yeah. It's really empowering.
Yep.
These simple things.
Absolutely.
Wow.
And I loved around Thich Nhat Hanh's centers is there's little cards of reminders, like by the faucet, it says this water fell from the clouds and landed on the earth and, drizzled down the mountainsides and arrived at my sink. What a miracle.
Yeah. God,
so
seriously.
that like, even in the bathroom, it's like, this is all the nutrients that have processed through my body and, now are coming out into the toilet. What a miracle. So little reminders that help us stay present with the miracles of life and how everything really is a source of happiness if we allow it to be.
If we allow it, that's the key. I like that at the Plum Village, they had little reminders everywhere, because that was one of the skills that I used. I had a lot of negativity in my brain, and like no matter what I did, it was negative, negative, negative. And it took a while to undo that conditioning. Like we talked about it. It's not like, okay, overnight we're meditation and like mindful, like gurus. No, it's like these practices, I've been probably about like 13, 14 somewhere years, similar to you, on this path. And man, I would put little like affirmations everywhere. My light switches, my mirrors, my doors, my notebooks, anywhere that I could like start training my mind to have a different tone in my head. Because man, we are all our own worst critics, is my experience. The feeling of I am not enough or I'm not good are so ubiquitous amongst humanity. And we all feel like we're alone in those moments. And shifting the gears in my brain from being a pessimist and the world is this terrible place out to get me, to like, wow, there's flowers growing through the cracks. Well, not right now, it's winter, but you know what I mean? Like the sun is out.
Yeah.
Like I can be excited about the sunrise this morning. It was gorgeous. Or that was yesterday morning. But regardless, I'm still thinking about that, and that was a couple days ago.
Yeah.
And that's not how I used to orient my world, and I had to make a conscious effort to change because it wasn't working for me anymore. It was miserable.
Yeah. And I gotta say, I always tell people, when they start working with me, you're signing on for a lifelong practice. And it will continue to grow and evolve and change, and you've never arrived. And when you think you have arrived, you can't stop practicing, because the second you do, your mind will go right back to the way we typically see things. So even, me, and now, like, it's an everyday practice. I can watch the tendency of my mind is still to go to the negative. It's still to worry or critique. And it's a part of my training to continue to feed the good, to always choose, oh, I noticed that this is happening again. Like, hello, worry, there you are. Let's switch focus and look at something, outside, take in a cloud, or touch a plant, and you have to have your techniques that work, that bring you back. And you have to have it forever, because it's our tendency, I think, as humans, to drift off into
and things. People always talk about how difficult it is to be a parent, and while I agree there is challenges, and I am not saying that it is not challenging at times, but there's also so much beauty in it. And again, I think that's that we dwell so much on the negative, and it's like there are some days I talk about dishes being the greatest meditation, sure, and then some days I'm like, I can't even handle looking in my kitchen because I spent the last 2.5 days ignoring the dishes, and now they've stacked up and I have to spend an hour and a half doing the dishes in the kitchen. Like, I'm no different than anybody else, but the reality is like, I get that like negative monster too. And even though with all these years of practice and the lifetime, my last guest, Leslie, and we talked about how, nothing is ever complete. We can think about the onion, or I like to think about a spiral. Whenever I have thought that I've worked through that negative thought, well, there's another layer to it that I never considered. And it's like the 3 days worth of dishes sitting in my kitchen. Not right now. I already took care of those, but that was a couple weeks ago. And it's just like, it's difficult to face when we've let things mound up. And being mindful allows us to give ourselves space and grace, which I appreciate.
Absolutely. Yeah, I just did a little video talk on this the other day, but we have these images of like spiritual teachers or people who they're enlightened, they have arrived, and they're living this blissful life and nothing affects them, and they don't suffer depression or doubt. It's like, that is such BS. Like,
terrible BS.
Yeah, like, read Thich Hanh's books, read Mother Teresa. I just finished her books, or the Dalai Lama. Like, they're never struggling, right? Like, they've lived very hard lives. Mother Teresa spent a lot of her time, she called it the darkness. She felt like she was in the darkness. God had abandoned her. She was fearful. She had doubt. It doesn't go away. We don't become superhuman. We have tools to face it. So in those moments, instead of her calling a friend and bitching about it and feeding her story and, woe is me, she went into prayer.
Yeah. Ooh.
She went into hours of prayer and doing love and kindness meditations. Thich Nhat Hanh, he was exiled from Vietnam. He also could not come into the United States. He had to go to France and learn French, and and he's dealing with wars, people at war, and all this conflict. And he is like, sometimes I fall into despair. Like, how can I not? I hear of a boat of refugees that got attacked by pirates. My first instinct is like, I'm traumatized. I fall into despair. Yeah. Does he go off and complain and bitch and moan and feed the negative?
Go to the pub?
Heck no. He goes into a room by himself. He closes the door and he goes into deep practice for days at a time.
Wow.
So it's not that you don't face the hardships, it's that you decide you're going to use the tools and the practice rather than, falling down the hole.
Pretty much, yeah. Okay, so we all have, and I call it life peaks and troughs. Like, things are great, things are not so great, and how can we deal with those the darkness, the Dante's Inferno, the layers of like struggle all humans experience. Like if there is one thing all of us are guaranteed to experience at some form of suffering at some point in our life, if it's not multiple times in our lifetime. And how do we want to walk through that suffering? Do we want to just lay down and take it? Sometimes I guess it's a rule that I have. It's not really a rule, but it's like the way I approach it is like, okay, something happened to me. I'm gonna allow myself 3 times of like wallowing in it. And then it's like, okay, that's hard. That sucks. Take some breaths. We've got to move forward.
Yeah.
That allows me to kind of get it off my chest and not have the whole like, so I'm not comparing, but I'm also able to move through it a little bit more of like, okay, like I had my despair moment, like, we're done now. You can move forward. And I learned that maybe with a counselor somewhere that was like, it's okay to feel sorry for yourself. Just don't stay there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Acknowledge the suffering.
Yeah.
And then you can move forward.
Yeah. And those are great practices of like, I teach a whole class on mindful of our emotions, but it's not, when I say these things, they didn't go and suppress or deny that it was hard. They totally leaned in, like feel the pain. Ty always said that, the way out is in. So you gotta dive into it, and these practices give you ways of feeling safe and stable, even when you sit with pain and suffering and difficulty. Is like in order to learn from it and transform it, you got to be with it. But a lot of us, because we've spent so long avoiding, trying to distract, get away from, we can't even sit with. The second we feel something, we pick up a phone, we get a drink, we call a friend. And what these great teachers are kind of telling us is, no, like put that, you got to go in.
Feel it.
Right. You got to be with it, and you got to have the tools that make you feel safe and comfortable being able to do that. And it hurts and it's hard, but with these deep practices, they are this like warming, comforting blanket that hold you in those moments. So you don't feel alone in that. Like, I'm feeling this, but I can feel it. I feel safe feeling it. And then you walk through it, you transform that, you understand what mentality, what perspective just gave you that feeling, and how you can use your wisdom and what you know to transform that perspective and come out with the light, on the other side.
Yeah, there's the whole thing about like when you're having a tough time, go and work, go volunteer. It kind of reminds me of like metta meditations. Are you familiar? Like that's giving love and kindness to yourself. I used to do them a lot when dealing with like a difficult family member or someone I was having a hard time with. And I was recently reminded of the metta meditations. Metta meditation, loving kindness to yourself first, to your loved ones, your friends, family, people you adore and love and care about, to people you have a tough time with. Or she had recommended like, okay, if you're having a hard time, or like other NICU moms is kind of what I was thinking about. It was a tough experience I had recently. And so then it made me not feel alone when I was doing this meditation, just sitting alone and thinking about all the other NICU moms and being like, oh, okay, even though they may not know me, like I'm feeling the energy of them and I know they're there, and God, they are a special breed of women, I'll tell you that. And I'm sending good energy and love and kindness and compassion to them through this tough time. And then to the world. And what's really neat about meditation, these types of things, and again, didn't take me long. It's just me sitting in my head by myself, basically. Instead of thinking negative things about it, I'm sitting in my head like, sending good energy or love and prayers and kindness and compassion. There's actually been changes in water. Studies have shown by people praying over water and sending good energy into water to decrease pollution. So, and prayer, meditation, the placebo effect, whatever you want to call it, it's kind of all the same in my brain. And there's data that shows that it's effective. And so however you want to use it to your benefit.
Yeah.
I think we should be using it to our benefit though.
Totally.
Because I'd rather look at the world through seeing the flowers through the cracks in the sidewalk rather than being like, these cracks in the sidewalk,
Yeah.
It's like the miracle of life is growing through this concrete. It's impressive.
Totally. And who, like, in my mind, I know people love scientific studies and blah, 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 and all that. But honestly, like, for me, the biggest proof is just live it. Like, go try it. Like, you wouldn't believe how wonderful it feels to just switch the way you look at things or take a moment of enjoying outside or a simple thing or noticing your conditions of happiness. Like, it doesn't have to be this grandiose, it's going to fix everything in my life. Like, just notice if you get 5 minutes of happiness, isn't that worth it? Like, that is, if your mind is a little less chaotic and angry and filled, isn't that worth it? Like,
definitely. Like, one of the mindful practices that I learned at a Physician Heal Thyself group was I was dealing with a lot of anxiety. That's kind of been my, like, I don't tend towards depression. I tend towards, like, the more anxious state. And I realized how much I was contributing to my anxious state. I was rushing, the type A, I'm going to get my list of 30 things done in a day. Watch me. You tell me I can't, watch me. But I'm going to run around like a chicken with my head cut off. And then I'm not going to be able to sleep because I'm thinking about the 3 things I didn't do because, like, I'm an overachiever. And so the exercise was, I want you to go rush around your house for 5 minutes and notice how you feel.
Yeah.
And it was so profound. And, like, still to this day, I'm in touch with this teacher, Dr. Charlie Cropley. He's an ND in Boulder. And the only thing he does is behavior modification. He doesn't do supplements. He doesn't do herbs. He does nothing else except behavior modification. And I shared this with him and he's like, I've never had anybody realize that. Or, like, I didn't realize that was so impactful. And I was like, I spend... at that time, probably 100% of my day rushing around from the time my feet touched the floor to the time my head rushed to sleep.
Yeah.
And how, like, even me thinking about it, I'm feeling a little more, like, anxious, like, tense in my body. And I'm not saying everybody that has anxiety is contributing to their own anxious state, but isn't it interesting that I made that observation and, like, I even changed the word, like, instead of saying I have anxiety or my anxiety, it's an anxious state. I've changed the relationship I have with that. And what I notice is that when I start tending towards more anxious tendencies, what is going on? Have I had enough water? Have I been for a walk today? When's the last time I ate? Like, just pull back to my needs and see, am I okay? Am I rushing? Can I go a half a step slower? That's kind of my little mantra to remind me, hey, you don't need to rush. Just go a half a step slower. And it made a profound difference in my life. And just not rushing. And, like, anybody that's dealt with panic attacks or anxiety attacks or just, like, that overwhelming tension where you just feel like you can't let go. I know what that feels like. And again, like, not overnight, but that's every once in a while. And I'm not sure, have you had a mindfulness exercise that you were like, whoa?
Yeah. 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 I also, I think my big mantra is this too belongs. Because when I get into those states, I feel like this shouldn't be here. I shouldn't be feeling this. And if I just tell myself, hey, this too is here. I'm having this experience. It's okay. Because I think mine was like a judgment of how you're feeling or what you're going through, and then wanting it to go away and feeling like you're bad because you're experiencing it, and then that just snowballs what you're going through. So yeah, like, this too, my big mantra is like, this too belongs, and not fighting the state I'm in was a big one for me.
Yeah, I was working with a patient. I think I did refer. I don't know if they ended up seeing you or not. It's been a while since I've seen them. But I was sharing with them that little mantra that I use. And they're like, oh, well, maybe that'll work for me. And I was like, no.
Yeah.
Like, it's what resonates for you and what you need. And what was kind of like the light bulb moment that, like, made you create. And it's like, okay, this too belongs. It's not like this is, like, the most profound statement or, like, half a step slower. It's just, like, whatever works for us individually that helps remind us, can I just have some non-judgmental curiosity here?
Yeah.
Can I just be in this moment for one more moment, 1 second longer, and not get caught up in the shoulding on ourselves about
Yeah.
it, right? Oh, that's a good one. Now, this avoiding, I've talked about it with other guests, avoiding our pain, avoiding our grief, our sadness, our whatever it is. Pain is a really big one. A lot of people are dealing with chronic pain from old injuries. You know what's crazy? Having a tailbone injury, I haven't even once considered taking a pain relieving medication. It's been really painful, and it's not because like I'm above the pain, but it's because it gives me that reminder. I need to be mindful, and that's truly the word I use when I'm like sitting down in a chair. That way I'm not just like sitting in a chair. You know, it's brought a whole new level of appreciation for my pelvis and how much it gets used on a day-to-day basis. Mm-hmm. We avoid as a culture pain. It's painful. It sucks. No one wants to be in pain. True. And it doesn't make it go away when we avoid it. In my experience, the more I avoid the pain, the worse it kind of gets in this like weird insidious way. And there's no one way to approach it. Like if you need to take the ibuprofen, fine. If you need to have the surgery, fine. If you need to cultivate a different relationship with the pain, if it is something like going through chemo or radiation, and like there's not a way to make it go away fast. Mm-hmm. This is how can I change the relationship so it's a little bit, maybe it's less discomfort, but maybe just getting to know that pain makes it somehow less uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. Which is interesting. Like you kind of, what does it look like? What's the shape of it? What's the color of it? What's the texture of it?
Yeah. Yeah, I find, it's a curious thing because even with emotional pain, right, or physical pain, we all know there's times where it is too overwhelming. Like
exquisite, yeah.
you need, and you have not developed the tools and the safeties yet to be able to be there. Mm-hmm. I think everybody, I've been there. I feel like a lot of people have been there where it's like, I gotta distract myself. Like I gotta take that pill, or because we haven't yet learned, like I had said before, safe ways of being with.
Safe is the key.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So in those, I try not to judge those people when they're there because maybe they don't have that safe way yet to be there. I know I didn't for a long time. And, we hope they don't get forced into that. Like I got forced into being able to sit with my emotional trauma because of my physical pain and trauma that came up.
Sometimes you need to get hit by 2x4, as my husband says, whether I like it or not.
Yes. And so sometimes we're forced into developing those ways of not avoiding and leaning in. But however we get there, being super grateful and willing to learn the ways to be with it. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't mean we'll be with it forever. Like, 11 years with back pain, and I did end up getting surgery when it got so bad I couldn't get up off the ground. But like, I learned, like, who cares? I got the surgery at the end, but I learned so much on that journey and developed so many techniques of being with emotional pain and like lighter physical pain. And so it doesn't mean that you're going to not address it in a medical way or with a pill. It means that you won't be as devastated and like taken over by it on the journey.
Yeah.
And you will be better for working through.
Definitely. It permeates every area of our life. Mm-hmm. It's not just, it's the way we speak to ourselves and thereby the way we speak to other people. It's the relationship we have with our job, with our dog, with the things in our life, rather than them being a burden, with the occasional, I didn't do the dishes for 3 days. It's like, they're generally not a burden. And that relationship has changed over the years. Versus no one loves doing the dishes. Come on. Yeah. No one loves taking out the trash. It's like, but if I'm stepping on crumbs on the floor, what do? Instead of be upset about it, I sweep the crumbs up.
Yeah.
It's like, just, I forget the Buddhist monk's name, but I think he was a Tibetan monk, though, and he was a Westerner that went out. No, Thai monk. And he talks about the 100 brick wall. Do you know this monk? And he talks about pushing the wheelbarrow. And the monk made him, the old monk was like, okay, well, now you emptied it over there. I want you to go put it back in your wheelbarrow and put it over there. And he's like, what are you talking about? Like, I've just done this 10 times.
Yeah.
The problem is he was thinking about pushing the wheelbarrow instead of just pushing the wheelbarrow. How many times have I thought about the crumbs on the kitchen floor and been like, blah, 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 there's crumbs on the floor, why don't you just put them in the trash, blah, blah, blah. Well, why don't you just sweep them up instead of taking that whatever that was, just sweep it up.
Yeah.
Just sweep the floor. This pushing the wheelbarrow thing has changed the way I practice in my clinic because charts are like the bane of my existence as a practitioner. And charts are also very important from a liability perspective. So it's important that they get done in a timely fashion that I remember the details. When I was thinking about doing my charts, you know how many hours I spent versus the 10 minutes it took me to finish the charts.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, yes.
Right? It's like, can I just do the thing instead of thinking about doing the thing? How much suffering I contributed. I wish I could remember that monk's name. I'll maybe put it in the show notes because it's just like a little like profound, simple thing that just, again, that hit a light bulb moment for me. And I was like, wow, I am pushing my charts around, thinking about them all day instead of just doing them.
It's our mental resistance that makes everything harder. Yes.
I'm glad I can laugh about it. But like, I'm sure you have things that you're like, wow, yep, been there.
Yes. Yep. We all have that.
Mm-hmm.
And that, that's the part of the non-judgment is like, you'll see it in yourself and you'll be a practitioner and you'll think you're a great practitioner and these things will still arise and you'll still have mental resistance, and then you laugh and you work with it and you move on.
I think laughter is the best way to go about it because gosh dang, there's just too much unpleasant things in the world. And I'd rather have a good laugh at myself and be like, wow, look how much time I just spent on that thing and it took me 10 minutes, maybe. So Erin, being an author, where can people find your books? Where can people get in touch with you if they want to work with you? Do you use social media? Just let my audience know where they can find you.
So books are anywhere you get your online reading content. I also have them at the studio, so you can buy them from me. I have one, Living from the Heart, which goes through it's a compilation of a lot of the teachings and teachers I encountered, and then how I meshed it all together to create my practice. And it walks you through creating your own practice on everything that's kind of included in a personalized mindfulness practice, all the different aspects of it. And then Healing Mindfully is specifically how to use mindfulness for pain, illness, and aging. So that's one chapter in the first book. And then I thought, this needs a whole book because it's a big topic for everybody right now. And mindfulness can really help with that physical relationship. Anywhere you buy reading content, and then I do coaching and group meditation classes and mindful yoga through my studio here in Montrose. So those can be accessed. I always do them in studio or via Zoom. So whatever you're most comfortable with, you can find those on my website, newleafmindfulness.com. And I'm on Instagram and Facebook. I am on there 10 minutes per week posting one thing. So don't expect to find me or get great communication. Not a big social media fan.
Yeah.
But I do have a little presence there. And I have, I don't know when this is coming out, but February 1st, I have a workshop, little half-day meditation workshop, and often do group classes. It's great to practice with other people and know that other people care about this and are working on their mental state, and working together. It kind of gets that collective energy going.
Absolutely. The next episode, I will be doing part 2 on my pregnancy and labor experience, kind of giving you the reality on idealism. And if you liked this episode, like and subscribe. I know it's cheesy, just do it. If you know someone that's struggling with pain, or like the person that's always crotchety about the dishes in the sink, send them this video. If you found anything controversial, which I would be hard pressed to find anything controversial in here, but you never know. Let me know in the comments if you disagree, or if you want to have a constructive conversation. I'm always open to that. But the way that that I get the benefit of doing this is, hey, if you subscribe to my channel, even if you never watch my content again, it gives me the capacity to know that I've made a difference in at least one person's life. I really appreciate it, you guys. Erin Easton with New Leaf Mindful Coaching. Next time. See you later.